Whatever your position is on that debate, one unmistakable legacy of Vietnam is that the price of America's withdrawal was paid by millions of innocent citizens whose agonies would add to our vocabulary new terms like boat people, re-education camps, and killing fields. There's another price to our withdrawal from Vietnam, and we can hear it in the words of the enemy we face in today's struggle. Those who came to our soil and killed thousands of citizens on September the 11th, 2001. In an interview with a Pakistani newspaper after the 9/11 attacks, Osama bin Laden declared that the American people had risen against their government's war in Vietnam, and they must do the same today. Number two man, Zawahiri, has also invoked Vietnam. In a letter to Al-Qaeda's chief of operations in Iraq, Zawahiri pointed, in a quote, to the aftermath of the collapse of American power in Vietnam and how they ran and left their agents, end quote. Zawahiri later returned to this theme, declaring that Americans, quote, know better than others that there is no hope in victory. The Vietnam specter is closing every outlet. Here at home, some can argue our withdrawal from Vietnam carried no price for American credibility. But the terrorists see it differently. We must listen to the words of the enemy. We must listen to what they say. Critics also complained when America intervened to save South Korea from communist invasion. Then as now, the critics argued that the war was futile, that we should never have sent our troops in, or they argued that America's intervention was divisive here at home. After the North Koreans crossed the 38th parallel in 1950, President Harry Truman came to the defense of the South. And he found himself attacked from all sides. From the left, I.F. Stone wrote a book suggesting that the South Koreans were the real aggressors and that we had entered the war on a false pretext. From the right, Republicans vacillated. Initially, the leader of the Republican Party in the Senate endorsed Harry Truman's action, saying, I welcome the indication of a more definite policy. He went on to say, I strongly hope that having adopted it, the President may maintain it intact. Then later said it was a mistake originally to go into Korea because it meant a land war. Throughout the war, the Republicans really never had a clear position. They never could decide whether they wanted the United States to withdraw from the war in Korea or expand the war to the Chinese mainland. Others complained our troops weren't getting the support from the government. One Republican senator said the effort was just bluff and bluster. He rejected calls to come together in a time of war on the grounds that we will not allow the cloak of national unity to be wrapped around horrible blunders. Many in the press agreed. One columnist in the Washington Post said, the fact is that the conduct of the Korean War has been shot through with errors great and small. A colleague wrote that Korea is an open wound. It's bleeding and there's no cure for it in sight. He said that the American people could not understand why Americans are doing about 95% of the fighting in Korea. Many of these criticisms were offered as reasons for abandoning our commitments in Korea. And while it's true the Korean War had its share of challenges, the United States never broke its word. Today we see the result of the sacrifice of people in this room, in the stark contrast of life on the Korean Peninsula. With America's intervention during the war and our willingness to stick with the South Koreans after the war, millions of South Koreans would now be living under a brutal and repressive regime. the Soviets and Chinese communists would have learned the lesson that aggression pays. The world would be facing a more dangerous situation. The world would be less peaceful. Instead, South Korea is a strong democratic ally of the United States of America. South Korean troops are serving side by side with American forces in Afghanistan and in Iraq. And America can count on the free people of South Korea to be lasting partners in the ideological struggle we're facing in the beginning of the 21st century.